Well, why don't we get started? Welcome, everyone. Happy Aloha Friday. I'm Janine Kurosawa. I'm the Community Engagement Specialist here at Chaminade University. Welcome to session 503, Positive Behavioral Support in the Classroom, presented by Dr. Dale Frixell. If we could just take a few moments to go over some housekeeping rules before we begin. It might make it a little more pleasant to reduce the panel view on your computer, as I believe we have well over 100 participants in this session. Just a little cue, it's a top right corner where you see that block of dots, you'll be able to select the speaker viewing platform. This session will be recorded and the chat will be saved. If at the end we run over time and we do not have ample time to answer all of your questions, we will add them to the discussion board on the ACCE webpage, and you'll be able to view them there. It'll be listed under session 503. So please leave your questions in the chat and we will get to them as best we can after Dr. Frexell completes his presentation. But as I mentioned earlier, he will be your presenter. Dr. Dale Frixell is the current Dean of the School of Education and Behavioral Sciences and a professor of psychology at Chaminade University, where he has been teaching both undergraduate and graduate psychology, counseling, and education courses for over 25 years. At Chaminade, Dale has also served as the clinical director for the Masters in School Counseling, Mental Health Counseling, and Marriage and Family Counseling programs. Dale received both his master's and PhD in psychology degrees from the University of Hawaii. In addition, he has a degree in the Master of Arts in Teaching from the University of St. Thomas and a bachelor's degree in sociology from the University of Minnesota. He has been a consultant for the Hawaii Department of Education's Primary School Adjustment Program, or PSAP, for over 20 years, where he has developed individual student support plans for hundreds of students who are having difficulty with managing their success in school. Before we begin, and before we move on, it is important that we put ourselves in the presence of the Lord. And we will go ahead and open up this presentation with a short prayer. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, amen. God of love and of life, thank you for the abundant blessings you have bestowed on us all. Help us to look deep within ourselves and discover the gifts you have blessed us with, and to receive your gifts with great joy. We thank you for the gift of our presenter today. May you guide and inspire him to share his knowledge with us as we open our eyes, ears, and hearts to what we are about to learn, and may it help us become better educators for our students each day. We ask all of this through Christ our Lord. Amen. Now let us warmly welcome Dr. Dale Frixell.
Well, hello, everyone. I hope your afternoon's off to a good start. And it's really an honor for me to have the opportunity to speak with you today. I'd like to thank Janine for the nice introduction and the prayer to get us started today. So, as I said, it's really an honor for me to be able to speak to you today. I really highly value teachers. I come from a family of teachers. My mother was a teacher. My grandparents were professors. My wife's a teacher. 5 of my siblings are teachers. And latest addition to the family, my youngest daughter is now a teacher, and she's teaching 4th grade. So I value the profession and the hard work that all of you do as teachers. I'm also very active in the training of new teachers. And, you know, really the thing that I see that has, I think, the biggest impact on not only the success of teachers, but the happiness of teachers is really the ability to control behavior in their classroom. You know, I think, well, I'll talk about that in a minute. So I just want to say a few other things about my background, in addition to what Janine mentioned. So, you know, I am the Dean of the School of Education and Behavioral Sciences, so we're very involved in the training of teachers and active in educational policy within the state. I am a psychologist. My real area of specialization is in the area of anger and aggressive behaviors. So I've worked with children, teenagers, adults, uh, with anger and aggression issues. Have done anger management programs with well over 1,000 kids. But one of the other great opportunities I've had in my life is to work with the PSAP program that Janine spoke of. And in that program, I've worked with hundreds and hundreds of kids who are having some difficulty being successful in school, a lot of times because of their behavior. So my role as a psychologist is to help develop their behavior support plan and work with the teachers and the parents to see how we can get that behavior under control and get them on the right path so that they can be successful in school. So let's see here. So I just start off around the first slide. You could see the surfer with the shark surrounding him. And I think sometimes teachers can feel that way, that, you know, you're on that surfboard and those sharks are surrounding you and, you know, just waiting to find some weakness and take advantage of it. So this question, do you spend the morning getting ready to go to battle? You know, if that's the way that you're feeling, then I think it's time to re-examine kind of what's going on in your classroom and try something new. So I don't know if, I'm not exactly sure what everybody can see, but if you can see my picture, I just wanted to share this. I have this Viking helmet here. If anybody would like to borrow it, you know, wear it into class someday and just, you know, tell your students you're ready for the day. Just let me know and I can borrow that too. So it says there, I already tried that. Behavior change takes time. So again, I've worked with hundreds of teachers and a lot of ideas I might mention that they could try. They said, I already tried that. And my comeback to that is, well, tell me about how it worked and what you did. And a lot of times I get the answer, well, you know, I started this program and we did it for a week and it just wasn't having any impact. And my kind of response to that is that the behaviors that your students are engaging in have taken them a lifetime to develop. And they've developed them because they work for them. So now what we have to do is try to change their behavior, and behavior change isn't something that is that easy, especially if you don't really want to change your behavior. So just as an example, you'll see these little notes I put on my slides so I don't forget to say something as I go along here, but it says exercise diet example. So I imagine that a lot of you have tried to start a plan to exercise more or diet and lose some weight. And, you know, I could ask, you know, how successful were you? And most people will probably say not too successful. You know, maybe I could do it for a while, but then kind of fell off the horse and didn't work so well. And I think the thing that's important about that is that's us trying to change our own behavior. Now, as teachers, we're trying to change somebody else's behavior. So it does take time and it does take effort. So keys to building a positive learning environment. So you can see on this little thing, it's really made up of philosophy, knowledge, and techniques. And again, I'm gonna ask, hopefully you can see my picture. But if I was with you in real life, and maybe one day I'll have the opportunity to come to your schools and do a presentation, I have a program that I do using different types of hats. And you can see, I already showed you my Viking helmet there. But I use hats to kind of remind people about some of the important points that I'm talking about. So just for this example, first thing you need to have a good behavior, to be a skilled behavior management teacher is knowledge. So hopefully today, maybe you'll learn new things, or, you know, I think it's a continuous journey where you're always learning things. So I have this it's called a newspaper man's hat. And that hat's supposed to remind us of, yeah, we gotta keep learning and keep building our skills. Okay, the next one is techniques. So I can just kind of change this a little bit here. Try on this hat. Okay, so I call this kind of my drill instructor hat. And so this is supposed to remind us, it doesn't look too cool on the video here for me. It looks like a dunce hat, but yeah, this is to remind me to talk to you about techniques. So you have knowledge. Now you can learn some techniques that you can use in your classroom to help with behavioral issues. And then really the final one and the area that's probably most important is your philosophy of teaching. So again, I can kind of take this hat and adjust it a little bit. And now we have our bishop's hat. And so the bishop's hat is supposed to remind us of philosophy. So our philosophy of teaching, our philosophy of behavioral control, and it's different for every teacher. One of the things I've been able to do with my work with the DOE is I've gone into hundreds of classrooms and watched how teachers teach. Some teachers can handle a lot of things going on in their classroom at the same time. Other teachers, they like to do things pretty calm and pretty under control. And both teachers could be equally happy with that. But I think where we have problems is if your philosophy and how you like your classroom to be isn't what's actually happening. So hopefully today I can share a few things, and a lot of these things might not be new, but something maybe you haven't thought about for a while. So let's take a look. So one of the things I always like to do is kind of assess how things are going and kind of assess myself and how I'm doing. And this is a little assessment. There's 20 questions here. So we're going to go through each of these and just think about how you would answer each of these questions. So let's get started. Are the majority of statements you make during the day to each student in your class positive? And a great activity I'd like you to try sometime is pick the student in your class that you think you give the most feedback to, whether it's positive or negative, it doesn't really matter, but most people usually think of the student that they give a lot of negative feedback to, but actually count, just have a little ticker, count how many negative and how many positive comments you make to that student during the day. And you'll probably be amazed at a lot of other teachers I know who have done this. And I also do this exercise with parents. If you looked at it as a fulcrum, right, that oftentimes the majority of statements we're making to a student are negative. And we're going to talk a little bit more about self-esteem in a minute. But I think the key is if you make a lot of negative statements to a student, you have to overbalance that with positive ones. So you have to find maybe really minuscule things that you can give the student a positive comment about. So positives should always outweigh the negative. Okay, have you stated the classroom rules positively? So do students actually know what the rules are in your classroom? Do you have them positive, posted somewhere that you can easily refer to? There's a pretty good literature on having students help to create the rules in your classroom. And you can certainly guide that as a teacher, but then you can always go back and say, hey, these are your rules, you made them. And I think that can be helpful. Okay, do all the students know the consequences for breaking rules? So do you have that structured and set up that if they break the rules, there's a consequence? And I'm going to talk a little bit more about consequences and how they can impact a person too. Okay, do you use your student's name in a positive way? I just was talking to a teacher the other day, and she was upset because one of her fellow teachers kept saying that she hated her class. And that was in front of the students. And this student, was an ex-student of hers, was all upset because, just wasn't having a good experience. So, the way we talk to our students and about our students is very important. And you guys know better than me that kids hear everything. You may think they don't hear those things, but they hear them. Okay, 5. you reinforce your students' specific behaviors rather than making general comments such as you are a good student. So what's good about it? You know, I really like the way you were able to stay in your seat. You know, thank you so much for helping to pass out those papers. Try to be specific because good and bad, that can cause a lot of confusion. Just 1 second here. All right, I guess that was my assistant here telling me that you can see my notes and I have the wrong screen showing. Is that? Could you just see one screen? Is that better or worse? Good. Well, I'm just going to go with it because I think it's good. If everyone could just nod their head if I have it right. I can only see 5 of you. It's not good. It is good. I'm getting both. Is it better if I switch back?
Dale, why don't you go ahead and switch back to where you were?
All right. How's that?
Yeah.
Okay.
You're good. Continue.
Okay. Sorry about that. Technology. I'm an old guy. Just trying to do my best here. All right. So hopefully you're keeping track of your answers. 6, do you give students choices and encourage their decision making? So I think, you know, these are 2 skills that we want kids to have, that they're able to make good choices and they're able to make good decisions. And I think that's something as teachers, we can help students to develop those skills by giving them opportunities to use them. Okay, 7, do you follow through with exactly what you say you will do? So, you know, if you say that, you know, if you do this, this is going to happen, and then it doesn't happen, that can cause problems. So I'll tell you one of my favorite studies, and I often use this when I talk to parents, but it's applicable to teachers also. So this was a study that was actually done where they're looking at schedules of reinforcement. So, you know, you can reinforce a behavior every time it happens. That's continuous reinforcement. Or you can reinforce it on some type of a schedule. So a variable ratio schedule would be where you would, you know, reinforce a behavior maybe after every 3 times it happens or 5 times it happens. So that's what they were kind of looking at with this study. So what they had was a little contraption where the monkeys would pull a lever and a raisin would come out. So they pull the lever, get a raisin, pull the lever, get a raisin. And, you know, the monkeys learned that by pulling that lever, they would get a raisin. So then they decided, well, now on average, they have to pull the lever on average 3 times before they can get a raisin. So, you know, the monkeys would pull it 3 times on average, get a raisin. Then they moved it up to 5 times and up to 7 times and up to 9 times. And the monkeys kept going, you know, working a little bit harder each time to get the raisin. So any idea how far they went before the monkeys said, you know, I'm not going to pull that lever anymore? I'll give you a second to think of a number. They actually got to 25,000 pulls for 1 single raisin. And that's when they actually stopped the experiment because the monkeys were working so hard, they thought they were going to injure themselves. And I think that just shows you the power of reinforcement, of consequences. And so if you use that with kids, you know, if you don't reinforce or you don't follow through, students aren't going to learn and may continue to do the same behavior. Okay, So is the work that you give students at an appropriate level, and is it the right amount? So, is it where they're at? If you can't do the work, you're going to have more behavioral issues in your classroom. 9, do you know what motivates each student in your class? And I'm going to talk a little bit about trying to some ways to really figure out what those things are. But it's important you know what motivates your students, what they're interested in, what their likes are, because you can use those not only to build a good relationship with your students, but to help motivate them to do the work in your classroom. Okay, do you encourage students to model other students' appropriate behavior? I go to a lot of particular elementary school classrooms and kindergarten and first grade, and it's amazing how you can just say, oh, I like how Johnny's sitting. And then all of a sudden the whole class sits up, how they're supposed to be sitting. So, there's a lot of power in that. Okay, 11, you take students aside when you discuss appropriate or inappropriate behavior. So, nobody likes to get yelled at in front of a lot of people, or at some ages, particularly middle school or high school, even saying good things to students can put them on the spot. So, you have to be kind of wise about discussing behavior and what's the right place to do it. 12, after an incident, do you talk with the students about how they could better deal with the situation next time it occurs? So, they didn't do so good this time. And, you can say, hey, that was really bad what you did. But you also need to talk to them about what they could have done right in that situation, or what they can do next time they're in that situation, so that they know. I mean, we oftentimes just take it for granted that they know what they're supposed to do. But if you actually talk to them about it, get their feedback on it, they're much more likely to be able to incorporate that into their behaviors. 13, do you avoid verbal confrontations when a student is angry? And I put there, it's all about timing. And I always like this example, which, maybe you have let's say a parenting example. Maybe you have a child who's always talking on the phone. And so and they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing. So a lot of times as parents, we start yelling at them while they're on the phone. Pretty much can guarantee you that's not going to be a good interaction. The best time to talk to them is when they're not on the phone. Maybe when you're, sitting at the beach and on the sand, and, talk to them, hey, it seems like you're spending a lot of time on the phone and you're not getting the things done you need to do, maybe your homework. You're going to have a much better outcome when they're calm and you're discussing it rationally than confronting some behaviors in the heat of the moment. Okay, 14, do you teach your students compensating skills for dealing with anger? So, what do you do when you're angry? And I think as this is one of the areas that I'm really interested in is, giving students a toolkit that they can use, whether it's deep breathing. Dr. Park talked about that this morning. Whether it's taking a walk, listening to music, just going to get a drink out of the drinking fountain, stepping away for a minute. Some things work for some people and they don't work for other people. And oftentimes things that work in one situation don't work in another situation. So having a lot of different tools that you can use is often very beneficial. 15, do you attempt as much as possible to resolve discipline problems in the classroom? So to me, this is kind of an issue where if you're always sending students to the principal's office or the vice principal's office, it's going to be hard for you to be seen as the person who's in control of your classroom. So, sometimes it's necessary to send somebody to the principal's office. Sometimes it's necessary for the principal or another person to come in and give some assistance. But as much as possible, handling classroom discipline on your own has the best outcomes. 16, do you allow students to have their own space when needed? Again, sometimes students are upset. I work a lot with kids who have different types of learning disabilities and ADHD, diagnosed or not. And oftentimes I suggest that teachers have a kind of a quiet work area in their classrooms. And, they come up with various creative names like the office or the den or the fort. And, they see a student's having some trouble, starting to get upset. Hey, why don't you go to the office, do a little bit of work there. And I like that a lot better than, Johnny, you're so bad, I'm going to move your desk away from everybody else. And now you're going to be socially isolated over here. Because when you have this office, you can say, hey, why don't you go to the office when you're feeling better, you got things under control, come back. They're still part of the class and part of the group and don't feel like they're being ostracized. Let's see. You generally avoid letting the students know that they're getting to you. So this can be a tough one, and students can be very perceptive, but being in control of your own emotions, I think, Dr. Park also kind of talked about those different feelings and emotions, and hopefully you can kind of stay in the green spot most of the day, or the green zone, and stay kind of calm and collected, but that's certainly not always possible. 18, when attempting to modify a particular student's negative behavior, do you focus on one behavior at a time? So, a lot of times when I meet with teachers, they say, well, he does this and he does this and he does this. And that may be true. And I always say, pick the one behavior that's the most problematic and let's start with that one. So work on that one behavior, get that one under control, and then you can move to a different behavior. 19, if you're ignoring an inappropriate behavior, do you positively reinforce for the opposite appropriate behavior? So punishment only stops behavior, reinforcement changes behavior. So reinforcing good behavior, looking for those opportunities is very important. And the last one, do you allow students to earn privileges? So, sometimes this works, sometimes it doesn't work so well, but, being able to let students work for something, earn something is another kind of one of those valuable life skills that'll help them in the future. All right, so how'd you do on that checklist? And I think when I do checklists like this, I often think, oh yeah, I haven't been doing that lately. I need to work a little bit more on that. Yeah, that's an important one. I need to re-examine myself and how I'm doing on that. So hopefully I had the same impact for you, and you can kind of take some of these things and see how you might use them. All right, so I got a little magic trick here for you. So what I'd like everybody to do is take a look at those 6 cards and pick one card. Everybody got it? They got one card. Okay, now it's a little participant interaction here. So you got to click your heels together 3 times. Okay, everybody do that, otherwise it won't work. All right, your card has been removed from the pile. Is it gone? Oh, pretty amazing, huh? All right. So it says there, that's the only magic that I can share with you today. It's really about taking action, not magic or waiting for a miracle to happen. And behavior change, as I've talked about, it does take effort and it does take a lot of work, but it's definitely worth it in the long run. So my presentation is supposed to be about positive behavioral support. So always good to know what that is. And really what it is it's kind of a combination of traditional behavior modification, so using rewards and punishments, but also combined with environmental modification. So as I've talked about, it can be very difficult to change people's behavior, but it's much easier to change the environment. So anything you can do to change the who, what, where, when, why of your environment is much easier than changing the person. And often by changing the environment, you can change the person. I have this simple example there, the trash can. So talking to a teacher, and the teacher says he's out of his desk all of the time. He's always going to the trash can. or he's always going to the pencil sharpener. Well, I mean, an easy one for me there is put the trash can right next to his desk. He's got no excuse to get up to go to the trash can. He's always going to the pencil sharpener. Make sure he's got 10 sharp pencils sitting in his desk at the beginning of every day. So that way, you've kind of removed those two things that he might get out of his desk for. Hopefully that'll make things better and you won't have to constantly be on him to, hey, go back and sit down. So combining environmental modification with traditional behavior modification. So really the idea of a functional behavioral assessment. So trying to figure out, why is this behavior happening? It's kind of like doing an investigation. And it's something that I actually really enjoy doing, is kind of looking at a situation and trying to see what's going on and how we can come up with a plan for helping with the behavior. So it's kind of the who, what, where, when, why of behavior. So once we can answer all these questions, it's actually pretty easy to figure out what a good solution is. So the first one, what is the behavior? Frequency, duration, intensity. And again, start with one specific behavior that you're really concerned about. Okay, step 2, consider biological and environmental factors. So medication, medical or physical conditions, sleep, diet. If your student's staying up till 1 a.m. every night and comes to school kind of groggy and grumpy, a pretty easy intervention is talk to the parents and make sure that he goes to bed earlier, if that's possible. I mean, there's family dynamics there. Maybe it's diet. Maybe they're hungry. So again, if you've ever been really hungry, you're probably not focused on what someone's saying. You're focused on, hey, I'm hungry. I need something to eat. So it's always good to get those out of the way. I worked a lot with kids with disabilities and was working with a nonverbal high school student one time. And she would just have these fits and just be crying and screaming. And, we were trying to look at her behavior. And so the first suggestion was, let's get a physical done with her, and basically found she had like 3 impacted wisdom teeth. She was in a lot of pain, and they fixed that problem, and her behavior improved 100% basically in one day. So again, if you can look at some of these issues, it's much easier than changing the person. Okay, with whom is the behavior most and least likely to occur? So I always think the best example of this is with parents, right? Johnny acts one way with mom and another way with dad. Or maybe your student works one way or behaves one way in your class, but another way in somebody else's class. Well, there's something happening in those situations that's causing the change in that behavior. So kind of looking at what those factors are gives you some pretty good clues. Okay, where is the behavior most and least likely to occur? So it happens in the classroom, it happens at recess, it happens in the cafeteria, it happens while we're lining up. Again, that's giving you more information about the behavior. What's going on in those situations that's causing the behavior to happen? 5, during which activities is the behavior most and least likely to occur? So what are you doing at that time? If the behavior always happens during math, maybe students frustrated with math. And so we need to figure out how we can make some adjustments there so that the behaviors don't occur. And then when is the behavior most and least likely to occur? Maybe it only happens in the morning. Maybe there's some separation problems. Maybe it only happens in the afternoon when they get tired. So again, we're collecting all this information. We're doing our investigation. 7, how do you react to the behavior? So does it work? If they start to have all these behaviors during math, and then you say, hey, you don't have to do math, just put your head down and take a nap. If their goal was to get out of doing that work, get out of doing that work, it worked for them, right? So we need to look at those consequences as we talked about with the monkey study. 8, what is the one thing you could do to increase the likelihood that the behavior will occur? Now, I don't actually want you to do this, but if you know the answer to that, you have some pretty good information on why the behavior is happening. Okay, if you know how to trigger it, that's a pretty strong clue. Okay, 9, what things have you done which have worked or not worked to stop or prevent the behavior? So it's always good to kind of keep track of what you've tried. And again, you have to give things some time for them to work. But if they don't work, then it's time to try something new. So I can almost guarantee you that once you've collected all this information and done this investigation, that it's pretty easy to decide why the behavior is happening. And if you know why, then it's pretty easy to think of how you can address the behaviors. Then you can put together your plan and your strategies for helping with that student's behavior. So another thing, I think it's important to collect some data. Oftentimes I'll meet with a teacher and they'll say, it always happens and it's getting worse. And I'll say, well, how often does it happen? Is it once a day, once an hour, once a week? It just always happens. So it's much better if you have some data. So there's lots of ways to keep data. You know, every time the child gets out of their seat, you put a little tick on a sheet. And then you can actually see, once you start doing some interventions, are things getting better because you actually have some data. So a tick sheet, some type of a spreadsheet, there's tons of different behavioral data collection instruments. And it's really just a matter of trying to find the one that's going to address the type of behavior that you're trying to help the student with. Okay, so I have to say this because he's going to refer to it in the video. You've got to work on the child's self-esteem. So I think, don't forget about self-esteem. Self-esteem is very important. Students that feel good about themselves are much more likely to be successful in school than the students that aren't. So this is a video that I really love called When the Chips Are Down with Rick Lavoie. He does a lot of work with students with learning disabilities, but I'd like to take a quick look at this. Whoops. Try this one. There we go.
What it all comes down to, what the entire purpose of this series is basically our ability to work better, work more effectively with kids. And whenever anybody comes to a workshop like this, in somewhere in the beginning, middle, or end of the workshop, the speaker says, you've got to work on the child's self-esteem. How do you do that? How do you build a child's self-esteem? Well, I've come up with an analogy that I think works. In order to build a child's self-esteem and work on a child's self-esteem, I would ask you to think of self-esteem as being poker chips. Self-esteem is basically poker chips. If you've got a good self-esteem, a strong self-esteem, you've got a lot of poker chips. And if you've got a poor self-esteem, a low self-esteem, you don't have many poker chips. Simple as that. Let's talk about two children who go to the school that your child goes to. So these two children go to every school in the country. One child is named Joe Poole. Joe Poole has tons and tons and tons of poker chips. How did you get all those poker chips? By good things happening to you. When good things happen to you, you get poker chips. Captain of the football team, here's 10,000 poker chips. Voted king of the homecoming dance, here's 15,000 poker chips. Take a picture in the paper for scoring winning touchdowns, here's 12,000 poker chips. This kid's got millions and millions of poker chips. He's had a charmed life, God bless him. He feels great about himself and his gifts. Now you also lose poker chips when bad things happen to you. You go to the prom with Joe Poole goes to the prom with the best looking girl on campus. 20,000 poker chips. Prom night comes, he's got a pitbull on the end of his nose. He loses 3,000 poker chips, but he still has the next game of 17,000 poker chips. He's still 17,000 poker chips ahead. And this kid goes to school every day with his baskets and bags full of poker chips. And sitting next to him is Larry, the learning disabled kid. Larry, the learning disabled kid, has poker chips like this. This is it. This is all he's ever done. Never even go to the captain of anything. Didn't go to the club. Never been on a team. Never got on 100 with that. Didn't go to the top off his SATs. Didn't even take his SATs. He's got a stack of poker chips like this. And now with the inclusion movement, we make those two kids go to school together and compete against each other. I would submit to you that that's not true. I would submit that that's not true. Anybody play poker here? Any poker players here? Sir, Chris, could you join up here tonight? Suppose, Chris, I would have asked you if you want to play poker. And I said, Chris, here's basically the deal. You're going to have this many poker chips. Okay, I'm going to have, there you go. I'm going to have all the poker chips in the rest of the room. I got basically 10 million poker chips back there. I'm going to play poker against you. What would be your first response? Would you want to play? No, okay, his first response would be, I don't want to play. What do we think of learning disabled kids saying to us? I want to go to school saying that? Don't make me go. I don't want to go stomach ache again. Don't make me go. Please don't make me go to school today. What's he saying to you? He's saying, I don't have enough chips to get in the game. I don't have enough chips. Don't make me play this game. But we say to him, you got to play. The law says you've got to play. You've got to go to school. So I say to you, Chris, you've got to play something with me. You're going to have that many chips, and I have bundles and bundles of chips back there. How would you play? Would you play conservatively, or would you play recklessly? Probably recklessly. He would be the one. He would be one of those who would say, I'll bet the whole thing. I don't care. That's what the learning disabled kid, when he says, that's what the learning disabled kid says when he says, sure, I can walk along the edge of that building. Sure, I can try dope. Sure, I can join the group, a gang. Sure, I can do that. In other words, I'm just going to be spontaneous and do anything. I'm just going to bet the whole thing. I don't care. I'll just bet the whole thing. Would any of you play conservatively? Yeah, some people are saying, I play conservatively. I just bet one chip at a time. That's what the kid with a learning disability is saying to you when he says, no, I don't want to ask anybody to do it. Don't ask me to do it. I don't want to put anything in the science school. I don't want to go to summer school. I'm going to take the chips that I've got and I'm going to hold on tight to those, and I'm not going to let these go. And in school, we make these two kids play the game of school against each other, and I would submit to you that that's not true. So in class, the first day, we're in class one day, and the teacher says, who was the president of the United States during the Civil War? And Joe Cool sitting there and saying, I think it was Calvin Coolidge, but I'm not sure. Well, what the heck? I bet 10 million poker chips. If I get the answer wrong, it's only going to cost me 5. Was it Calvin Coolidge? Teacher says no. Larry, the learning disabled kid, is sitting there and he's looking at this little stack of poker chips. He's got 25 poker chips to his name. And he's thinking, I think the answer is Abraham Lincoln. I think the answer is Abraham Lincoln, but I just don't dare answer. I don't dare respond because I have another game I've got to play at lunch. You see, yesterday when I went to lunch, I gave the lunch lady, the one with the hairnet and the tattoo, I gave the lunch lady a $20 bill, and she only gave me change for a 10. And my father said, don't you come back without that extra $10. You go to that lady and you tell her she gave you the wrong change, and he's thinking that's going to take me 25 chips. It's going to take 25 chips for me to go and ask that lady for my money. So I don't dare play in this game because if I lose the chips, I won't have enough to play in the game I'm going to play at lunch. And people say the right answer is Abraham Lincoln. The reality is that the self-esteem of our kids, the problem with the self-esteem of our kids is they just don't have enough focus. The solution is to give them. How do you give kids focus? How do you build their self-esteem? One is you find, if you're a parent or you're a teacher, you find the island, what Bob Brooks calls the island of confidence. You find the one thing that child can do well and you make a big deal of it. You celebrate that. You make that very important. If you're a mom and the only thing your child knows how to do is use a Phillips head screwdriver, every Thursday before he gets off the bus, you loosen every bloody screw in the house. And when he gets off the bus, you give him the screwdriver and say, go to a town because nobody does it like you. You got to be a talent scout. You got to find things he does well. You got to find, because every time you praise a child, every time you say, that was a good job, you're giving him poker chips. Parenting is pretty simple. Being a teacher is pretty simple. It all comes down to this. Your job is to make sure that every child you deal with has more poker chips when he goes to bed that night than he or she had when they got up in the morning. That's it.
All right. Well, hopefully you like that video, and I think there's a strong message there about the importance of self-esteem and our role as teachers in helping kids with self-esteem. And self-esteem certainly helps with behavior in your classroom. If kids are feeling good about themselves, they're much more likely to have good behaviors. So I'm probably going a little bit slow here, but I'll just kind of power through these. Positive behavioral killers. So setting up a student to fail. So again, these are some things that really have shown that if these are happening, you're going to have more behavior problems. So waiting, if it's classes waiting for things, that's when students act up. Long tasks, no breaks, tasks that are too difficult. You get the wrong place, the wrong time, the wrong people. So those are just kind of some basic things. So here's some basic modifications. Prevention. So once you've done your investigation that we kind of talked about, you can usually come up with some prevention strategies. So if you kind of know why things are happening, you can think about how you can prevent those things. So be organized, have a posted schedule, reduce downtime, look at your seating arrangement, who kids sit next to, how your classroom's set up, group composition. Some students work great together, some don't. It's really important to be aware of those. Staying mobile, walking around, proximity control. So you're, stand close to the student who's having some behavioral issues. They probably won't have as many. Staying in contact, using shaping, fading, and imitation procedures to gradually change behavior. So, behavior change is not going to happen all at once. So, for example, you have a student who never raises his hand and just blurts out information. So you want to try to work with that student to change that. Well, it might start out with, he raises his hand and blurts out the answer at the same time. You could reward that. You could say, thank you for raising your hand. Next time, wait till I call on you and then raise your hand and then give the answer. And then the next time he raises his hand and waits for a second and then blurts out the answer. Oh, that was good, Johnny. You raised your hand, you waited, you got to wait for me to call on you. So you're kind of gradually reinforcing and shaping that behavior. Okay, determining reinforcers. So what drives that person? And then having a variety of reinforcers. I always think it's so funny that, little kids are so motivated by a stamp or a sticker. But eventually that kind of wears off and you got to look for something new. Setting and using classroom rules, using the pre-MAC principle, which is grandma's law, right? You got to eat your peas before you can have dessert. Using positive language that's not demeaning or insulting. Intervening early. So if you see a behavior start to happen, get in there right away before it gets worse and blows out of control. Communicating with other teachers, maybe, what are other teachers doing that have helped in a similar situation? I saw the awards for teachers that have been around for a long time teaching, and they're a wealth of experience that I'm sure would be happy to share some ideas and some things that have worked for them. So don't be afraid to ask. And then communicating with parents. Some things are out of our control as teachers. So we need to have a close partnership with parents. So reinforcement menu. There's lots of different surveys. You can look these up that you can give to a student. They can kind of let you know what kind of things they're interested, what kind of things motivate them. You can survey parents. Being aware of what motivates your student is basically the key here. Just the point here, develop a contract with the student. I really like the idea of contracts, even for very young kids. You write out a contract, what they're going to do, what you're going to do. If there's a reward, what the reward is, have the student sign it, you sign it. Sometimes a parent signs it. And that can kind of take you out of the situation, because now it's not you against the student, it's the student against the contract that they agreed to. So I really like contracts. So I think the kind of a takeaway here is, be creative. And if something's not working, try something new. You can see this cartoon. All I need to do is give that cord one good solid yank and all the toys are instantly picked up. So kind of a creative way to address having stuff all over the place. Probably wouldn't work too well, but it's creative. This is a problem-solving strategy that I've used for many years just to help kids kind of make good decisions. It's called the STAR. So you can say, hey, you're a star, you're making good decisions. So stop and define the problem, think of solutions, act on the idea, review your results. I put these up in classrooms, teachers refer to them, and it seems to have a pretty positive impact on classroom management. So a lot of different kind of creative things. I'll just kind of run through these. Reward type charts you can use. A homework chart, whether they're doing the homework. Again, this is kind of data collecting. Quick note to parent, another teacher, administrator, doing something good. This is great for self-esteem. So now it's not just you giving positives, but somebody else is going to give positives to your students. Kind of talked about some of those. Just to talk about the hero technique, which is another technique I really like. A lot of times as teachers, we use Johnny was so bad during class today that we're not going to have recess. And really the kind of the hidden message is there. You guys should all be mad at Johnny because, we're not having recess today. But the hero technique is the opposite of that. It's looking for, hey, Johnny was so good in class today. We're going to have 5 extra minutes of recess. So now Johnny becomes the hero, right? Everybody's congratulating him. Hey, thanks for helping us get 5 minutes extra recess. And you'll see after that, kids will say, hey, Johnny, make sure you're paying attention. Maybe we'll get 5 extra minutes of recess again. So you kind of get the whole class on your side and building up that behavior. So these are just some things like I'm sure a lot of you have used, a bead jar or a coin jar. There's lots of these I've used where, students can collect beads for good behavior. And then when they have enough beads, they can make different things like this gecko. You can give puzzle pieces. When they get enough pieces, they can put the puzzle together, dot to dot. Every time they do what they're supposed to be doing, they get to move one more step. Recipes, I've seen this one kind of interesting and creative where they can earn a part of the recipe, and when they get all the parts for the recipe, they get to make the snack. Marble jars, that's probably the most common one I see. Game board, where you get to move along the game board every time you engage in the appropriate behavior. A lot of teachers have some type of a store where students can earn tickets or rewards and then cash them in for something. Cribbage board, you can move your peg around the board. Okay, so I think Janine, I'm kind of about up in time, I think. Kind of my final message here. Does it work? So if what you're doing isn't working, try something new. And if you try something new and you give it some time, still not working, try something else. Don't just get frustrated, go home upset every day because you had such a rotten day, and look for supports from your administrators, from other teachers. There's so many great ideas out there. And I think a lot of times as teachers, we just need to ask and we can get that support. And then my final question there, how would you feel if you received it? So whatever you're doing, put yourself in that place and, how would you feel if you were the teacher working with you using that strategy? All right, I think I'm at the end and I'm not sure what the time is here, but if anybody has questions, I'm more than happy to try to answer those. And I appreciate you taking the time to join me today, and hopefully you found at least one thing that you think about or that you could maybe try, and try it next week, because I found going to these conferences that a lot of times I get a lot of good ideas. And then, when it actually comes to implementing those, it doesn't always happen. So think of something right now you'd like to implement, and give it a shot next week and see what happens.
Thank you, Dale. Dale, we actually have 5 more minutes to go, and we do have a couple of questions. So
Good.
first is, how best to help connect new students with friend groups?
Well, I actually have worked quite a bit with that. Probably the best thing to do is give them a peer partner. So, recess, you go out to recess, you're a new kid, you don't have anybody to play with. If you assign 1 or 2 or even 3 students and say, hey, I'd like you guys to hang out with Johnny today, and make sure he has fun on the playground. And students are usually happy to do that. And that can be in the classroom as well as at recess. I think doing activities for the class to get to know the new student to get to know the class can be good. Having the new students share some things about themselves and find common interests, and kind of a process, but kids, I think, are always willing to jump in and make new students feel comfortable, especially if they know that that's their role, and you make it clear that that's their role to welcome these new students.
Perfect. Okay, and next question would be, what would be a baseline for length to try things before trying something new?
That's a tough one. It kind of depends what the behavior is. I would always give something, well, always is a lot, but at least 4 weeks, I would say. 3 or 4 weeks if you're trying something new. You can get a pretty good idea with most types of interventions in that time. And usually when you try a new intervention, things get worse, because you're trying to ask the student to change their behavior. It's been working for them, and all of a sudden it's not working. And so they're going to fight back a little bit about that. So you kind of got to go over that hump. And then oftentimes you'll see things start to get better. So, give it a couple weeks and see if there's any impact.
Okay, next question is, do you have a strategy to communicate to a reluctant or defensive parent that their child may benefit from being tested? Their example is there more to their misbehaviors than just laziness and immaturity? Any thoughts?
I always think it's best when you talk to parents is to, just let them know that their child's struggling, and that, we really want to find out what the issues are so that we can help your child. And it's really about trying to, let the parents know you're trying to help. You're not trying to ostracize their student or make them feel dumb. You're trying to figure out what actually is going on, because once we know what's going on, we can develop some type of interventions and supports. And a big conversation I often have with parents is about possible ADHD. And the first thing that usually comes out of most parents is, I don't want my child on medication. There's other things that can be done, but I think a lot of times parents don't have a clear understanding about how medication works and what the potential benefits as well as side effects are. So just being able to talk to a doctor about that oftentimes is helpful.
Perfect. Well, I think we got through some of the questions. We're about a minute out. I think the group needs to actually regroup on the main board. So at this time, Dale and I wanted to thank you for your participation and attention. If you could return to the ACCE 2022 website, you can view some of our generous sponsors and then talk with other fellow attendees on the discussion boards. And this will also be where I will go ahead and post the link to the video. I'm sorry that some of you had some hard time actually hearing video, but I'll post the link there and you can go ahead and watch it at your leisure. And then again, this session was videotaped and recorded, so they will go ahead and post this on their webpage as well if you want to watch it again at your leisure or share it with anybody else at any of your schools. So thanks to Dale. We appreciate you giving up your Friday morning, afternoon to share your wonderful highlights on how best to support our students in the classroom.
Yeah, so thank you very much. And my email's there. I'm always happy to chat, or, you know, we can set up a phone call, or, you know, I go out and visit a lot of schools and classrooms. So, you know, if you're stuck, I'm a resource here for you. And I love to get out and visit classrooms and work with teachers and students. So my email's there. Just let me know.
All right. Thank you all. God bless you all and have a wonderful weekend. Stay safe. Bye-bye.